Alright, welcome to the gameplay guide of the Imperial armor, and in the first game, we're facing off against Purple Hybrid, which I believe is the slight yellow version with the veemon and the 2-box yellow top end. So we are going second, and I decided to keep this hand just because it's not the worst, because I can always just choose to Digivolve all the way up the line. Of course, the ideal hand to see would be like Davis Kens, you know, a bunch of searchers, but at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, building the first suboptimal stack and not trying to brick is always still better, and I think it's fine. Here we find our other veemon, so we actually now have choices, because initially if we didn't find the veemon, I was going to evo all the way up to a level 5 and sit at the back and then evo into dragon mode to cycle and draw cards that way instead. But because of finding the other veemon, we can now have the option to go ahead and hard play the other one, and getting 2 hits is really good here, because then we get the Davis Ken and the Dino B, which we can utilize them for later on, and we're pretty much set up because we can choose to play Tamers to follow up. We can choose to DNA if we can, if we keep the stack alive, but it looks like they go into Kaiser Leo and pop our veemon anyways. So here, we're pretty in an okay position. They are going to chip away at their security with Lugamon, and I think they're going for an alliance, which is pretty funny. 2 checks, and actually finding the Davis and Ken for us is absolutely huge, because Davis and Ken's always equals the free search. And we have a Wormmon to work off of with. After digivolving and all that kind of stuff, it's really nice, and we have an XV to push out. We're basically ready to go for the full online combo this following turn. Now the thing is, I actually decided to keep the XV at the back just because I want to play it safe. I want to make sure that I want to pick up the Stingmon, but you know, chances are I don't really have the guarantee to pick up my second piece, although the odds are kind of high where I could have pushed out the XV, played the Wormmon out, and then search and then grab either like any of our dual color cards or then the Stingmon even. So I kind of went for this slightly awkward play, but it's just to have a backup just in case like they have a Rihi, and I know there are several other like aces that they can potentially play in this deck as well. And I'm trying to sort of like test the waters a little bit to see what the situation is going on with the first initial stack. If I ever lose the first initial stack, at least I have partition to work with, and I can always DNA to another pile or a Dino B later on, just by worrying just to find the other piece that I need here, because I intend to also put them back perfectly at 3 memory, so that I can set up the Davis to find some pieces. And this is excellent because now our searching is really optimal here, because we have a Wormmon to play again next turn, hoping to find like a level 4 that we can work with. Now keep in mind, the Stingmon is actually only a one-of in the deck, and yeah, stay tuned for the deck profile, which will be coming out tomorrow, guys. So definitely subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and we'll go in depth why. But to give you guys a little bit of early hint is that we're focusing a lot of armors. We want a lot of our armors, and we actually are able to search a lot off of it too with the promo Wormmon, because all of our armors mostly are going to be 2 color cards. And here with the Syndromon, they're gonna go for the end of turn, overclock, attack, and DP reduce us, which they get rid of the Imperialdramon by minusing 2 with the token plus 6k with Syndrome itself, and then Rihi gets to minus another 4, which takes out that Stingmon on the side. So this is exactly what I meant. By playing that Wormmon, we can potentially get the ALittleSpoon, and that is gonna be fulfilling our DNA source for the requirement for both blue and green. And arguably speaking, like this build kind of is pretty efficient at doing that, because compared to the regular Imperial, you have to specifically need XV and Sting, which is already really good at what it does there. But then having additional pieces that are armor that I'm playing a lot of that are both blue and green included, it actually makes DNA quite easy here. And I'm just trying to see, okay, how do I want to take down security? Do I want to go push and go for aggressiveness and sort of set up for lethal? Because then I can follow up with Magna X, and the whole reason why ALittleSpoon is so important is because it gives Magna X the armor's form source in its Digivolution to get its immunity. That's the whole reason of what happens when you combine Magna X and Imperial together, and it works really well because we have such a strong immune stack on there. It has blocker, and we can stop multiple attacks with it. Is going to be really nice, and they just can't get rid of it. They're gonna have to deal with it, and if they don't deal with it, we're gonna go for lethal swings next turn. They're gonna have to at least get rid of the XV here, and we're putting a lot of pressure. You can also see Togemogu in our hands as well, exact same reason. And here we might be a little bit stuck now, because now we kind of exhausted all of our rookies, and if we don't have any rookies for follow-up to continue to play and search, that could really screw us over, because now the game situation is looking kind of tight where we're both down to 2 security. It can be anybody's games at this moment just because of that insane whiteboard and so on. So they're going to go into their Dustmon. They're going to change our XV into purple, which is why I turned upside down to make sure that we know the colors changed. Looks like they want to go into a Valgramon here because they don't have one in the trash, but of course they're going to pass turn. So they're going to swing with the Uko here, and this is a big challenge because I guess technically knowing they have a Valgramon, I didn't want to block it because I want the Uko to survive, and then potentially they don't have Valgramon and they can't get into that combo, and then they can't get rid of our XV, so I let it through. And here, because it swung into Elytra anyways, the chances of getting it deleted is pretty high, so they're able to go into Valgor, and I decided to actually block here. Looking back, maybe I should have blocked the first swing on the Uko anyways, but I realized if I don't block here, I'm not going to get the Magna X's unsuspending, and they're gonna have enough swings with the token plus Sundrillmon's possible of overclock. They can actually just finish the game, especially if the token survives the other check. So I'm not too worried in a way because I know the game is not going to end here just yet, just because they're at 0 memory, they don't have a lot to work with, and Jackway's only going to gain them 1. And not to mention, our Imperialdramon is actually immune until the end of their turn, thanks to the Magna X. The Magna X protection lasts all the way through the stack, and here we actually see our just game-winning plan right here. We can just go ahead and swing. We're gonna have to suspend down that token, so we don't get to unsuspend, but that's totally fine because we have enough memory to work with to go into Magna X. Even if our opponent puts us at 3 in the beginning, we're gonna have more than enough because of the Davis and Ken to gain 1 back. Swing, unsuspend, proc it again, and finish the game. Alright, game 2, we're facing off against Imperialdramon Red Hybrid. This matchup can really go either way, especially when it comes to the ordinary Imperial. It's like who can swing on who first, and it can also come down to who can control a little bit, but it's really just about the all-out attack. The control part really just comes to us as Imperial, but talking about the mulligan hand, I decided to keep it just because for the same reason from the previous game. I see a way to digivolve the line up if I need to, and I didn't really necessarily want to mulligan that just because again, we want to be greedy with those pieces, but if we don't find them and find ourselves a brick hand, it becomes very unplayable. And I feel like I can take my time a little bit, but not too long either. I want to set up as many Davis and Kens as I can just because I'm drawing into them and top decking at the moment, and I have a veemon to work off of the next following turn to start searching. And I feel like I feel like I could take the time, but it really can't, because at any time now they have a memory setter, they have red memory boost, they have analog, they're just gathering all their unga bunga pieces, and then once that happens, they're just gonna swing out on all of us. All of our security is gonna be gone, and they can just OTK. So I kind of had to bank on this a little bit and waiting a little longer just because. And here with the Wormmon search, I decided to go grab the other Wormmon because I feel like it could be useful. But I'm also kind of missing a level 4 piece, which I needed to be green in order for me to actually even DNA there. So I feel like, you know what, I don't really have a choice. I feel like I just have to set up. Otherwise, my other plan is to just push up Digivolve into Imperialdramon and then sort of threaten a potential fighter mode ace. But it's kind of not the best either, because if we do that, they go into Ancient Gray. Ancient Gray is gonna pop it before even having the chance to go into that. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. And when it comes to this matchup, you're just really having to understand what Red Hybrid does, understand how they try to unga bunga you, be very detail oriented on keeping a lookout on what pieces they're finding and what pieces they might be missing. And that's the most important thing, because here if they have the older Ancient Gray, they could even just potentially swing for all checks and then finish us off, but thankfully they didn't. So it looks like they're trying to give us as little to work with as possible, setting up the analog to gain memory back and all that. It tells me they may not have the BT4 Ancient Gray to finish all the checks, and then Flamemon probably swing for game, which is pretty good for our end. And at that point, the only thing that can really save us is a Giga Def, which I personally actually don't even run in this build. So here's our chance. Since we're able to have that opportunity, it really just comes down to that kind of, I guess, somewhat like gambling, or just kind of guessing, or just gambling the fact that they don't have it. That's kind of it sometimes. So we're just gonna go ahead, we find our piece, we can go into Stingmon thanks to the Wormmon because of the first check, which is pretty crazy because the Stingmon is actually a one of only. But aside from that, we have a lot of blue-green sources as our level 4 to easily find and dig through, but just finding that and access it into it, we're going to try to attack as much as possible and draw as much as possible from the inherited, because we need to refuel our hand for the follow-up plays. And this is really important. So I'm just going to continue to attack, and I'm just drawing and drawing. This is nice because now I find Magna X, which is sort of one of our biggest counters or moments where we can keep ourselves alive just because of having a blocker. If they don't play like the plugin or anything, we can stop the 5-check combo, we can stop the multiple checks, or even just stop them from swinging for a game, which actually gives this deck a little bit of an upper hand when we are able to get into it. And the fact that we're able to suspend down that Takuya and Koji off of Dragon mode is the whole reason why they're not possibly able to push for the game, because they can easily go into like the BT4 one, like I mentioned now, if it's unsuspended, swing for all the checks. Chances are they could even have more sources and fighter mode as well if they're able to rack it up that way. But we can always ace them. That's what we're trying to look out for. We're also trying to look out for the fact that they're trying to Digivolve by an effect, which is always a very, very important counter for us in this matchup, which is why setting up the Dragon mode as soon as possible is always really crucial when it comes to this, because it looks like here they're going to have to go and Digicross, and this actually does play around our Dragon mode a little bit just because it pops it. And we don't have a Primogenitor to sort of keep us there, which is unfortunate, but that's okay, because at least we still get partition here. And that's the whole reason why. But this is good because of that one turn, we're able to sort of keep ourselves in there. And having 4 Davis and Kens is just absolutely insane. Like setting the 2 up in the early stages was a huge payoff as well. And we basically just play them nonstop, bit by bit to pass. And here we can just keep playing, but nothing to search, which is a little unfortunate. Wormon's not really going to be able to Digivolve anything from the trash either. And I felt like, okay, you know what? I want to have an armor piece. I was about to go ahead and DNA into pile, but knowing that I have a Magna X in hand, I actually intend to get into it this turn. So that's why it's really important to have those blue-green armor pieces, or armor pieces in general, because it lets us go into Magna X and giving us the immunity like I mentioned earlier. So now we can continue to draw and cycle, and I went into Dino B, so then I can suspend down the Ancient Grey as well, and possibly even swing over it if I want to. So I decided, like, okay, you know what? Primogenitor is just absolutely amazing because it lets us go into the Magna X for only the 2 costs. Swing over this, we have a trashing security effect thanks to Dino B. We have a piercing thanks to the Sting, which also pierces the check there. They also get to resolve the Ancient Grey first to play something back out, just in case if something happens, just in case they might have something that stops us. But technically it shouldn't at this point. And just so you guys know, I kind of got excited with the Primogenitor. I should have put it in the battle area, which I totally forgot. But I knew I was winning for sure this game because I get to unsuspend and finish it off. Game 3, we're facing off against Fenrir Lugamon, Takemi Kazuchi. This is also a pretty strong meta contender matchup that we're facing off here, and it can go either way. It's very similar to Ancient Grey. It's really just about like Unga Bungaing as well in terms of that. And same reason as I kept my entire hand throughout all the last 2 games, even though I'm not seeing like Davis Ken and all that kind of stuff. It's really the idea of like trying to Digivolve up the stack instead if we don't see it, because it's way better than breaking. And trust me guys, from my personal experience of playing this deck so many times, I try to mulligan for a better hand and it always fails. But I just personally always like to stick to safer play, and it seems to be paying off a little bit because now I'm finding my rookies. I have a memory setter right there to start off as well, and I'm able to actually easily climb into the stack if I need to the following turn. And I think all I need is really just a green source to get my DNA combo online already, and I don't mind giving them 3 memory just because like this would be the opportunity for me to establish it in the early stages of the game to get my most amount of value back to start my turn at 3 every single time. So it looks like they want to go ahead and chip with a Luga here and running into our veemon, which actually they survived. I think they just want to pitch away an AG because they could just mind link it afterwards, but it looks like they might be bricked up a little bit here. They don't really have much of a follow-up play. So I feel like, okay, you know what? I can actually go for a little bit of an aggressive one, which didn't pay off because I was like, oh yeah, by just hard dropping this veemon, I'm going to find myself possibly a Stingmon or some kind of green armor, whatever it is, and I could go for the end of turn DNA, but that kind of didn't backfire. That kind of didn't pay off, and it backfired on me a little bit because now I'm ending up giving them a lot of memory here, and playing the Davis and Ken, putting them to 4 pretty much gives them everything they need, and they could really high roll, and that's Takemi Kazuchi. As they digivolve and climb up the stack and they find their pieces, they can go for the full combo and we were just completely wiped out, and there's just nothing we could do. The other reason why I decided to push out that veemon was because I felt like I wanted to hatch the egg the next turn and sort of like cycle into it, since it's still early in the game. That's my only, again, chance to sort of do that. And I felt like, so yeah, sometimes in this matchup you really just have to gamble and hoping that you have it, and if you don't, then it's kind of like, sure, whatever. Just because, like, since they're climbing up like this anyways, I felt like it didn't matter no matter how much memory I gave them. And that kind of comes down to that Lugamon matchup, because once they go into a Luga that comes out, Mind Link underneath gain a memory, they're guaranteed 2 memory to work with. They can evo into any level 4 for the 2 cost and ensure that they can trash a card off of it. Then they can go into Soul Lugar, and having the AG underneath is just going to make them climb up all the way here anyways. And because of the Takemi Kazuchi memory reset, like I said, it doesn't matter how much we give them at that point. So I just thought, like, okay, yeah, setting up the Davis Ken right there would have been the best shot, but honestly it looks doomed. They basically have the full line. We're basically kind of like turn 2 or turn 3 being like completely like crushed right here. But wow, all hope is not lost just yet, and this is the reason why this deck can have that kind of out to it against in this matchup. Again, I want to mention, normally with Imperial there wouldn't be too much aside from Giga Death, but the fact that we play some form of other additional bombs such as that Magnamon straight up de-digivolves them gives us a second chance. It gives us a turn back here. So I'm here like, okay, getting all excited, and it's like, let's just go ahead and climb up. Although I feel like I shouldn't have digivolved the Wormmon in the back, I probably should have just hard played it, but that's the other downside when it comes to this deck. If you don't have Stigmon, you can't gain enough memory back sometimes, I feel like, to keep your turn. Although I felt like I could have just played the Wormmon, but then I didn't have enough memory to sustain and go into Imperialdramon, and like I said, keep the turn to my turn. So the best capability that I can do at the moment is stun down the board and try to buy myself an extra turn and go from there to see if I can potentially win. This becomes a much more difficult position because all they have to do is, if they find a Kazuchi, they can just hard drop it, go into Takemika again, and then it's just all over for us. And you know, they do have the pieces in trash, because I did end up trashing the Kazuchi as well, just because I feel like, okay, if they're able to reduce us by 8k, then we lose our ace threat, because right now we have potentially like an ace threat, although we don't have it in our hand. But our best case scenario is to pretend like we might have it and make our opponent try to play around it a little bit, because all they're thinking right now is, okay, I might need to get rid of that level 5 preemptively. If I can get rid of that level 5, I can set myself in the next turn and then basically play from there. And then that's fine for us, because we get partition and then we get to do the combos all over again, giving us another chance. And that's why Imperialdramon is so good. Buying that one extra turn alone like that is just absolutely insane, because they can't unsuspend, and because they can't unsuspend, they can't really finish the game off of it like that either. So they're gonna go for the Hellugar. They are gonna go for the pop. We're able to partition out. They're not gonna be able to keep their turn realistically, and it doesn't make sense for them to suspend analog anyways, just because in a situation that we remove their Fenriluga with sources, they can actually steal a memory off our turn. So we're gonna have to keep pushing for it right now at this moment. We can't wait any longer. We're just gonna continue and try to do as much as we can, gain as much advantage as we can. Like I mentioned, we're just gonna go ahead and DNA, gain a bunch of extra memory with that. We're gonna have to start swinging. I feel like I really need to play some board control, just to hope that they don't have a backup line to go into. Although they have most of their sources that they need to digivolve, all they really need is Skull Buluki, and they can climb all the way up all over again with a Lugamon at the back as well. So maybe in hindsight, I should have just swung at security, not try to take down their Digimon. But I felt like they have a lot of bodies, and we can't stop all those attacks either, and we only have one security. So we're trying our best here. We're trying our best. That's the other downside, no piercing. So that's a little unfortunate, but that's just how the build works. I decided to go here to go into Togemogu, and probably should have just stayed as a Togemogu just because it has blocker. But again, like when it comes to Fenriluga, they can just climb all the way up and they'll just remove absolutely everything. So I try to stand as tall of a Imperialdramon right here because I can potentially threaten a fighter mode ace off of my dragon mode or off of the Imperialdramon, and they have to play around both of it. But again, they're gonna climb up here, pushing out the Luga, tucking underneath AG to gain a memory, now going into the Doruga, and it's just a matter of they have either the full line with Soul Lugar again, and if they do, then they can just easily Digivolve all over again. And it looks like they do have the Scobaluki too to utilize, which lets them go into possibly a Soul Lugar, or if not, they actually decide to go into the Dex Dorga here just to cycle through additional card. And it looks like they actually have the pieces they need, because now they get to toss away Soul Lugar. Soul Lugar gets the Digivolve on top of the stack that way as well still. And because we don't have anything that's 6k or lower from the pop, they can just play out a body, and that's going to be Tyrannomon. Tyrannomon is going to continue to cycle. And you guys can see, like, this deck can go through it fast. Once they go through it once, everything is basically pretty much guaranteed for them to do it all over again, and half of their deck is in the trash before you even know it. And that's just how quick it can be. And it's the same situation again. No memory is going to matter at that point. And because they're a turn player, they're going to continuously resolve their effects before we're able to. So I'm just trying to see when would be the actual opportunity for me to actually use Dragon mode to maybe ace and get rid of our stack, but also going into fighter mode on top of Dragon is not going to be the best thing ever, because we're not going to be able to bottom deck their main core stack, which we actually need to get rid of. So here they're going to attempt to delete our pile, and we could get the partition, but we actually have Primogenitor this time to get into fighter mode. And although I think we were trying to understand the situation here, like I mentioned, just because they're turn player priority, I would say they get their turn effects first before we even get to attempt to bottom deck them off fighter mode ace, which then doesn't matter anyways, because they can just DP reduce our fighter mode ace. But they actually went for the smarter play to get rid of the Dragon mode, because Dragon mode could potentially go into another fighter. But again, like I mentioned, the fighter's not going to do too much. So this is pretty much the best case we can do. The fighter gets the bottom deck in the end, but it doesn't do too much because they get to trash and swing for game. The Ultimate Dragonkin Collection is a very special limited series. It symbolizes a huge part of my journey since the very beginning. So make sure to grab yours on the AVAULT store right now, and I really appreciate the support. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you in the next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.